Hi, and welcome to this episode of HR and Cocktails. Today, I'm joined by Amber Trail of Elite HR Connections, and we're going to be talking about the U.S. Department of Labor's independent contractor rule, which helps us understand who can be an employee or a 1099. So welcome, Amber. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So tell me about you and Elite HR Connections.
Yes, so I've been in human resources for 15 years now, kind of hard to believe. And then I joined Elite HR Connections back in October of 2023. It is the most amazing place for HR professionals to go. It's an online community, and it's a judgment-free, stress-free zone where HR professionals can go, pick up some new skills, vent. They get burned out, so they can go into different focus groups. It's just a nice judgment-free, stress-free zone that's available for HR professionals around the nation.
Awesome. And I think that that's a really important thing because, as HR professionals and even for our business owners, there are a lot of things that we have to navigate. And sometimes we just need other people to bounce things off of. To your point, vent, because we don't have those inside of, our own organizations many times. So exactly. I think that that's awesome. So today we're going to talk about the Department of Labor's independent contractor rule. And so for those of you that may not be familiar with that, it is a revision to a rule that there's always been a rule, okay? It changes depending on the administration in the White House. And at this point, there has been a revision to the rule, which gives us a different analysis to determine who qualifies to be a W-2 employee and who can be a 1099. And I think that in general, in organizations, there has been depending on the size of the organization or the sophistication of the organization, there has always been a little bit of confusion around whether or not it was just employee's decision. It's up to discretion whether or not, I talk to clients all the time. They're like, oh, no, they want to be a 1099. It's like, yeah, well, that's not really how it works.
Right.
So, what has been your experience in working with organizations and their understanding of how to determine whether or not someone can be a 1099 or a W-2?
That's an interesting question because I have had employees with clients that are like, no, I want to be a 1099. Just switch me over. Well, no, that's not how this works. And some of, the business owners are like, okay, that works for me. But they don't quite understand there are, certain situations that you can't have a 1099 employee. You have to have a W-2. Now, when you get into a little bit larger organization, they all are tend to be W-2 employees, which makes sense. They're in the office most of the time. Now, one thing I have noticed is recently a lot of remote workers are wanting to be 1099, and the business owners are like, why not? Why can't they be? Well, it's the same as them being in person. They're just working from home, still getting, the office, base set up in their home, but they're doing all of the work for the employer.
Correct. Yeah. And we're going to talk about, the criteria to determine whether or not someone qualifies to be a 1099 or a W-2 employee. But, one thing that I don't think that organizations also understand are the implications of misclassification because, the difference between someone being a W-2 employee and a 1099, while there are many of them, some of the differences are that, if someone's a W-2 employee, the employer pays the employer portion of their taxes. So half of the taxes are paid by the employer. Right. Also, employees, if you offer benefits, those individuals are eligible for benefits. So to the extent that you misclassify someone, then you're on the hook for any period of time that you didn't properly classify them. And of course, there are other implications as well. So what have you heard from organizations around, other than, the employee just wanted it, or the contractor, because I think we kind of flip those two words sometimes, but other than the fact that the contractor just wanted it, what are some of the other reasons that you're hearing that organizations are allowing individuals to choose their status or select a particular status?
One thing I've noticed is whenever it's project work. So they can come on, they're doing a small project. So instead of bringing them on temporarily and then bringing them on as a W-2, they're doing certain project work that might last a year. It might last 6 months. And we could, classify them as 1099, but we have to be very careful with exactly what that project work is. I've noticed a lot of business owners have been pretty open, though, to, listening when you're like, wait, how are they classified? Are they W-2s or 1099s? And when they're not classified correctly, they're like, oh, because I don't think they quite understand the implications. And that's, once you explain that to them, they want to be in compliance. So it's a little scary, and it's a huge eye opener for them that they're like, oh, wait, okay, we need to reevaluate and look at this. But a lot of it has been project work, the employees, of course. And then it might be, I don't know, they are running based off, they have a lot of their own equipment, such as like maybe mechanics. They have their own tools, they have all their own equipment. They kind of go in and set their own hours. So you have to be very careful when speaking and finding out exactly what they're doing. So it's a lot of work to find out which classification they fall under.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And what the new rule does is really try to give us some additional guidance on what that looks like. And, this rule is very new, so I'm going to look at my phone because I want to make sure, as we're having this conversation, that I'm being clear about what the new rule is, because it has added some additional criteria to the previous rule. So the previous rule was in 2021. It was similar to what we had been accustomed to. And this one isn't extremely different. However, it does add some additional things that we need to take into consideration. So the new rule, which doesn't go into effect until March, basically says that we need to look at the totality of the circumstances, which basically applies a comprehensive economic reality test. So basically helps to identify on both sides, both the employer and the potential contractor, what the totality of the economic reality is for those individuals. There's also a 6-factor test, the detailed analysis of control, which is, who determines when, where, and how the work is done, right? Who really has control over that, as well as the revised consideration of the integral nature of the work, which goes back to your point. If someone's coming in to do a project, but that project is integral to the nature of the work, then we have to really look at that to determine really is that work being done by a 1099 or not. And then I think that, one of the things that we also need to think about, and there's a variety of them, we'll cover them, is, whether or not the individual is taking any risk of their own. Because many times it's a matter of convenience for both parties, right? But the potential contractor has no risk. They have no skin in the game. And so that's one of the real indicators of whether or not that individual is a 1099 or not. But before we get into the really heavy stuff, let's get to the fun stuff.
Let's do
it. All right. So what drink would you like?
A cosmopolitan.
A cosmopolitan coming up.
Perfect.
So Amber, your drink is a Cosmo. What made you choose a Cosmo?
Sex in the City.
Sex in the City. So I've actually never seen Sex in the City. I know. So was this a popular drink that they drank in the show?
It is, yes. Yeah. And when I first turned 21, that is the first drink that I had at a bar where it was really, Sex in the City, cool New York City style.
All right. Well, let's make this drink cool and sexy New York City style. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our vodka. You can make it with different types of vodka. You can make it with citrus vodka. I like to make mine with just plain vodka because we're going to add the citrus. So we're going to do 3 parts vodka, maybe a little more. You never know. So we're going to do 3 parts vodka. Because we do have to, because we got to split it. It's a double.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Right.
There you go. We make a little bit more. But if you're making it for yourself, it's yeah.
Just
yeah. All right. And then we're gonna add some Contro. So Contro is an orange liqueur. You can use Contro, you can use triple sec. I personally prefer Contro because it's not as sweet as triple sec, but it's completely up to you how you decide to do it. So we're gonna just do 2 parts of the Contro. And again, it's completely up to you if you use this or triple sec. They will do the same thing. Again, I just like this one a little bit better. One thing I will say for me is I definitely like my fresh fruit. So this calls for a lime. So you'll do a fresh lime. If you don't have fresh lime juice, that's fine, but I really do prefer the fresh fruit. So we're gonna do a half of a lime. I like to move it around in here and make sure I get all of the juice out of it.
It's a nice summery taste.
It is. And then we are going to do a splash of cranberry juice for color. And because I am a Georgia girl, I always put a little peach schnapps in mine. So I don't know if you want peach schnapps in yours or not. Okay, so we're gonna put a little bit of peach schnapps in. This is not the regular recipe. This is a Georgia Cosmo because I'm from Georgia. So just a little bit of peach schnapps, not too much. So we're gonna put some ice in here and then we're gonna shake. We are shaking because we have juice. So when you have juice, you shake just to make sure that it gets fully incorporated in here. And, okay, and make a mess while you're at it, right? So we're gonna just shake. And while I'm doing this, under normal circumstances, we would have chilled glasses. So we have our martini glasses. We would normally have them chilled, but we don't have them chilled right now. But the recommendation is to make sure that they're chilled and have them ready. I also have converted to the stemless glasses because they're just easier. I mean, regular martini glasses are very top heavy. It's difficult to manage. So there you go.
Makes you a little nervous that you might drop it or
exactly.
spill it. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're just gonna shake this really well and ignore the mess. All right, and so now we are going to strain. And whenever I'm using the shaker, I just use whatever the strainer that's on there. Yes, it looks great.
Perfect Cosmo.
Yes, it looks perfect. We gotta taste it to make sure, right? All right, and then we're just gonna garnish it with some lime slices, just to make it look a little bit prettier, right?
Love it.
All right, so here we go. I know. Cheers.
Love it.
Good.
Love it.
All right, so we have our Cosmos. Cheers. And let's just do another taste, even though we know they're tasty already.
So good.
Yeah. And even though, like I said, haven't done Sex in the City, this is one of my go-tos when I'm like, I just want something good, especially in the summer because of the splash of peach schnapps.
So refreshing.
Great choice.
Yes.
Thank you, Amber. And we're gonna need this vodka to talk about this topic because it's a very complex topic.
Right.
And I understand that businesses, there's going to be implications to businesses. There are some businesses that will be more impacted than others, and there is a role that HR can and should play in helping organizations understand that. So we'll get more into the details of the specific changes to the rule, but let's really just talk about, what is the role that HR practitioners should play in having conversations with leaders and business owners around bringing their awareness to this issue and helping them to take it seriously and really do a true analysis. What role do you think HR should play?
Honestly, I think HR can be the proactive, in letting them know about the risks, because the risk is what usually scares business owners into really rethinking, oh, this is important. I need to start looking into this because I don't want to be liable. I don't want my business to fail. I want it to succeed. So what can I do to be in compliance? And I think for HR, it's determining because, we tend to be the know-all, be-all, and, especially in all things HR. And there's so many, legalities that change, things that we have to be up to date with. And having to understand this new rule is very important, but it's deciphering what employees or the 1099s, what they really should be classified as. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's important for HR to be proactive, not waiting until March.
having these conversations to, grease the skids, so to speak, in the thought process of leaders and executives, particularly when you have organizations that use a lot of 1099. So there are some industries that, are more prone to using 1099s. There are some professional services firms that use a lot of 1099s, construction firms that use 1099s. And so it's really important to really look at the nature of that relationship and for HR to your point, help outline the risk.
Right.
And listen, doing an internal analysis and an assessment doesn't mean that you, business owner, leader, have to do something different. It just allows you to make an informed decision. Right? And if you choose to assume that risk, that's fine. But from where I sit as advice and counsel and risk management, which is what I think HR is and should be, my goal and my responsibility is to make sure that you have the information to make a decision from a place of knowledge. Right?
Exactly.
So, talking about the different industries that are, have more opportunity to have more 1099s, some of the things that we tell our clients to think about if they truly believe that they're working with a true independent contractor, right? Aside from applying the tests, which we'll talk about, aside from that, some things that they can do is to, make sure that they're doing business B2B, right? So does this individual have a tax ID number and an LLC or some type of entity that they have created so that I'm not paying an individual to their social security number.
Right.
Because that kind of is like one of the first flags. If I'm paying you to your social security number and I'm paying you to, Amber Trail, the number that you were born with. It's kind of like, okay, are you really a business or am I just paying you as an individual?
Right.
And there are some true independent contractors. So like the woman who did my makeup, she's an independent contractor, right? And it very clearly, right? But she's an individual.
Right.
So that's a little bit different. So there are some nuances. So you really do have to look at it. What are some of the things that you're seeing, around things that people can do and organizations can do to kind of protect themselves and insulate themselves?
Well, definitely one of the things I think is when you have someone approach you about being a 1099 and it truly does fit that classification, making sure that they are aware, because like you said, if they're just using their social security number, they may not necessarily have worked as a 1099 before and understand that they actually have to pay a lot more in taxes. And so when they get that, like, wait, turn me back into an employee. Like, that's not working for me. So I think just having that conversation with them first and making sure they've worked as a 1099. But I've definitely seen more 1099s in the construction, the automotive, different one-offs, like getting your makeup done or, different items that would be more short term, but they're the decision makers. So if I'm working with someone and I'm directing them, I'm giving them, here's what we need to do and checking in on them, they're going to be classified as an employee, as a W-2. So it depends on a lot of those 6 factors. Like it depends on a lot of things, but it really comes down to the awareness, finding out, exactly what's happening, and it could change. That's the important thing. So when you start out, you could be a 1099. But then your duties increase, or you could be working directly for someone else. Your job is more directed, then you have to transition over. And I think just knowing that and being aware of that's most important.
No, I 100% agree, because when I first started my business, everyone was a 1099. But as we started to grow and mature as an organization, I wanted to give more direction, to your point, and provide more tools and say, this is how we're going to do it. Because before it was just like, just do the work, please. Thank you. I'm so happy that you took this client. And then it became more of, okay, well, this is how we're going to do it. This is the, Prescott HR way. Then I realized, like, okay, I'm behaving like an employer and their role is becoming more like an employee. And so we had to convert everyone to W-2 because I wanted to continue to develop those standards and consistency and expectation. And so you're exactly right that it can change. It can change because they were truly operating as 1099s in the beginning. It was just like, here's your client, send me an invoice. And then it became a little bit more of, all right, well, I really want you to use this system. I want you to do it like this. Here's the SOPs. Here's how I want you to document it. And it was like, okay,
right.
You're an employee. So now I got to do employery stuff, know? And I think that a lot of times that's scary for organizations. Yes. The thought of, I have to hire an employee, they instantly start to think that they have responsibilities that they may not really have, right? I think I hear people say, I don't want to hire anybody because I don't want to have benefits. Like, well, are you hiring 50 people today? Because if you're not, you don't have to have benefits, right?
Right.
I mean, it's nice to have. It's a good tool to attract people, but you are not required to provide benefits under 50 employees. And so I think some of it is just the misconception of what does it mean to be an employer? What are my actual responsibilities? Because you can pay somebody through QuickBooks. You don't have to go out and go, and I'm not, saying that QuickBooks is the only thing you can use, but you can pay somebody through a very simple platform that you're already using, right? And you don't have to go out and sign up with a payroll company or do something that's very difficult.
Right.
What have you seen? What are some of the things that you've seen people believe are a responsibility that's holding them back from acknowledging the fact that they need to have an employer-employee relationship with the people that they're working with?
It really comes down to benefits. What benefits? Time off. Yeah. People are really scared when they're like, oh my goodness, I have to offer time off now. I have to do this. I think a lot of it is that responsibility. Having the weight of someone else's life on your shoulders is huge, and it's very scary. But it doesn't have to be. You're providing an opportunity for someone to learn and grow and succeed, not necessarily, oh my goodness, I have to provide for their family now and this. They get too involved in the details of all of that. Well, yes, you are, but you're providing them an opportunity to learn and grow. And I think that's huge when it's not as scary as what it really seems to be.
Yeah. And to your point, too, one other thing that I thought about that people also think is they think employee, full-time employee equals salary. And it doesn't.
Right.
And employee doesn't even mean full-time. So it doesn't mean full-time. It doesn't mean salary. It doesn't mean benefits. And depending on the number of employees that you have and the state that you're in, it doesn't even mean paid time off.
Right.
It just means you pay part of the taxes.
Yep.
And you don't get fined and get in trouble for misclassification. That's what that means.
Right.
So let's go back to the rule and really what the rule is and how it impacts it. And, I will be very honest, I've read the rule. I've done an analysis of the rule, but it is not burned into my brain. So I'm going to refer to my phone. So one of the key factors is, does the individual have an opportunity for profit and loss? And let me just say this, because I think, before we kind of, when we were preparing for this conversation, I said that I really believe that this regulation is not geared toward Main Street employers.
Right.
It's really geared toward those organizations, those really big organizations that, and I say capitalize, but I don't mean that as a negative connotation, okay? But that, let's say leverage.
Yes.
Leverage, okay?
Yes.
That leverage the gig economy.
Right.
So the Ubers, the DoorDashes, the
task
Instacarts.
givers.
Yes, exactly. Those organizations that focus on the gig economy and leverage that to run their entire organization.
Right.
So if they didn't have drivers that selected to go and get my groceries, thank you, because I have been using Instacart since 2019. And literally every time I go in there, it's like, you have saved 340 some trips. Thank you. But if it wasn't for those individuals, they wouldn't have a business. Right? So what role do these individuals play in the organization, which is why this rule now has come out with these key factors to determine whether or not they're critical to the organization. And one thing that I found to be very interesting is, particularly as it relates to the opportunity for profit and loss, is that it specifically states, and this is what the final rule says, is that here it is to determine whether the worker genuinely operates as a business owner, managing risks and opportunities rather than just choosing more hours or tasks, which is very telling about how this is going to be interpreted once the rule becomes final. Right? So what are your thoughts about, and listen, I mean, as much as I would love to say that, Uber and Instacart were my clients, they're not. So what would you say would be, particularly from this perspective, might be some of the implications for smaller businesses?
For smaller businesses, I think they just need to really look at the tasks. Are you just giving out certain tasks and letting someone pick it up? If it's, almost like a Fiverr type of platform, are you sending out tasks and anyone can pick it up? Or are you specifically directing a task to an individual? If you're doing that, it's a W-2. Now, the task that someone can just pick up, it also depends. Are you giving them exact orders on what you need to do? How you need to do it, what systems you need to use, because with the new rule, it sounds like that is in fact that person is becoming now an employee.
Yeah, absolutely, because one of the second factors is the investment by the worker and the employee. So we know with many of these larger scale gig types of platforms that individuals can join, that they have to use a specific platform.
Right.
Their vehicles have to meet certain standards. There are certain things that they have to do, and there's not a lot of investment that those individuals have to have, and there's not a lot of risk that those individuals take. I can tell you firmly, being a business owner, that there is a lot of risk involved in owning a business. And to be able to say that you're truly a 1099, there has to be some risk on your part. And the reality is logging into an app and saying, hey, yeah, I'm willing to go pick up a couple of people and take them from a concert to their house is not really a lot of risk, right? One of the other things that it says is the degree of permanence of the work relationship. So, it doesn't mean that they can't be a temporary worker or a project-based worker. But it also doesn't necessarily mean that I can decide I want to log in here and do 1 trip, 4 trips, or 200 trips, right? So I think that there are going to be a lot of things that organizations are really going to have to think about as they continue to navigate through this. So as an HR person, what would you say your advice would be to both other HR professionals and to business owners about this whole thing in general?
Knowledge. Soak it up. It's so hard because there's so much information that comes out all the time. But I think just being aware, and it's okay to say, let me look into that a little more. It's totally fine for that. But I think understanding and being willing to learn more, soak it up, understand it, and, focus on what's really important. But it's removing that risk, as much as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And if all else fails, call an HR consultant or an attorney, because they definitely would be able to help you as well. Well, Amber, we've covered a lot today. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you think people should know about?
The only question that I have for you would be, is it possible, because I have this question come up sometimes, and I'm not quite sure how to answer it with this new rule. Is it possible to have both W-2 and 1099s in your business?
It is, but it depends on, let me just say this, I am not an attorney. This is not legal advice. Please contact an attorney if you need legal advice. Yes, you can. But what I would say is if they are in the same, doing the exact same job, sitting right next to each other, it would be very difficult to justify that. But so, for example, the way that we, Prescott HR, operates in organizations, we are a 1099 to that organization because we are a business. We are an incorporated corporation, right? And so the consultant that comes in, while a W-2 of my employee is a contractor to this person, and they can perform duties. So yes, we can come in and do that, and you can still have HR people who are doing HR work, but we're not doing the same thing that they're doing. So I think that, again, it's really about making sure that you're looking at whether or not you're doing the exact same thing.
Defining it.
Exactly. Because if you have, let's say, for example, just to make it simple, let's say you have tier 1 help desk technicians, and you have 6 of them. and 4 of them are W-2s to the employee, and 2 of them are 1099 individuals that are not from a firm that you outsource to. They're just 2 individuals that just came in and said 1099. I would question, and they're doing the exact same job as all 4 of them. I would question whether or not an employment relationship would exist between those other 2. But the answer is it could. It just depends on the circumstances.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Amber, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining this episode of HR and Cocktails, and we'll see you on the next episode.